Welcome to this explainer, where we are tackling a highly technical, completely maddening frustration. Picture this for a second. You are running a multi-step form automation. Every single CAPTCHA solve works perfectly, the API returns the token, everything looks totally green on your end. But then your automation still fails catastrophically at the final step. Why? Well, because a multi-step form can easily fail even when every single CAPTCHA solve works flawlessly. Today, we're unpacking exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how to fix it. For the longest time, developers have treated CAPTCHAs as simple, isolated roadblocks. You see a challenge, you solve it, you inject the token, and you move on. But in production environments today, especially with multi-step workflows, it's just never that simple. The reality is cookies matter, session state matters, the live page context matters, token timing matters, and the final accepted workflow matters far more than just the raw number of tokens returned to you. So the real question isn't just, can we solve a CAPTCHA? The better question is exactly this: can we complete the whole multi-step workflow reliably? To answer that, we've put together a practical checklist covering 6 key areas: why CAPTCHA chains fail, mapping before you solve, sequential solving and state, timing and dynamic detection, smart step-level recovery, and finally, the ultimate success metric. Let's get right into it. All right, let's kick things off with Area 1, why CAPTCHA chains fail, and the illusion of isolated solves. Here's the massive paradigm shift we need to make right off the bat. The old way of thinking focused purely on returning an isolated, valid token. But in a real-world workflow, you might have one CAPTCHA on step 1, another challenge on step 2, and a completely different CAPTCHA type on step 3. At first glance, sure, this looks like 3 separate solve tasks, but each step depends entirely on what happened before it. Getting a successful token means absolutely nothing if the target server rejects it because it no longer recognizes your workflow state. Just look at the sheer variety of chain patterns out there in the wild. This shows exactly why a static one-size-fits-all approach is just doomed from the start. You might encounter a low-complexity chain where it's just reCAPTCHA on steps 1 and 3. Easy enough, right? But then you might face mixed types, like reCAPTCHA for login, but suddenly it's turnstile for checkout. Or you could hit conditional CAPTCHAs that only trigger if the server detects a suspicious input or risk signal. If your script isn't accounting for progressive difficulty or those unexpected conditional paths, it's just going to break. Moving right along to our second area, map before you solve, or why you need to stop debugging blind. This is step 1 of our practical framework. This brings us to a massive rule of thumb. If you do not map the chain first, you are literally debugging blind. Do not start with that CAPTCHA API call. You have to start by mapping the workflow itself. List out every single step. What expected page should appear? What session data is required? What CAPTCHA type might pop up? What specific field or callback actually receives the token? What is the final success signal? You absolutely must map out those conditional paths we just talked about before writing a single line of solver code. Looking at the first 3 steps of our checklist here, you can really see how sequence and continuity form the absolute bedrock of handling multi-step forms. We map first, we solve in order, and we fiercely protect our session state. Which leads us nicely to Area 3, sequential solving and state, the core mechanics. This explores the second and third steps on our list, which honestly is where most automation scripts actually fall apart in production. I see a lot of developers trying to be clever here by parallelizing solves to save time. It's a trap, guys. Unless the steps are truly 100% independent from one another, step 2's URL or parameters might not even exist until step 1 is successfully submitted. The psyche might change entirely after the previous response. People always ask, can CAPTCHA chain steps be solved in parallel? The answer is almost always no. Most chain forms depend on the previous step's session, page state, or server response. Parallel solving might look faster, but it just leaves you with expired tokens, completely invalid context, and wasted API costs. Sequential solving is usually slower, yes, but it is vastly more reliable. Because here is the real secret sauce: session state. What does that mean? It means the continuous use of the exact same session, cookie jar, browser context, headers, and workflow identity as a chain moves forward. Listen to this carefully. If a token is solved against one session and you submit it from another, the token itself might return successfully, but it will still fail at the application level. A valid token does not help you if the target server looks at it and says, wait, I don't know who this is, simply because your cookies and headers don't match the workflow history. Okay, moving to Area 4, timing and dynamic detection, or how to handle live context. We really need to manage the strict timing of those tokens and dynamically detect what the live page is actually asking for. Think about it. Tokens expire, so do not pre-solve every CAPTCHA in the chain at the very beginning. ReCAPTCHA tokens typically expire in just 120 seconds. Turnstile tokens expire in 300 seconds. If you try to pre-solve step 3 while your script is still navigating through step 1, that token is going to die long before the workflow actually reaches step 3. It's a guaranteed way to fail. You must solve each CAPTCHA only when that specific step is ready to submit. Doing this drastically helps reduce wasted solves and timing-related failures. Also, never assume every step will use the exact same CAPTCHA type or site key. You have to re-extract the site key from the live page at each step. A page might return a completely different site key right after step 1. A later step might suddenly switch from an expected reCAPTCHA to a turnstile challenge. Or, like we mentioned, a conditional challenge may appear only on certain paths. Your workflow must dynamically inspect the live page and re-extract the exact parameters at each step before you trigger a solve. Let's roll right into Area 5, Smart Step-Level Recovery. In other words, don't start over. This covers what happens when things inevitably go wrong midway through your chain. So, when a chain fails midway, what should happen next? The amateur move is to blindly restart the whole script from the very beginning. But you can't do that here. Previous steps might have already created a partial state on the server. Maybe a draft record was saved, a pending verification was triggered, an account step completed, or a checkout section was initiated. If you blindly restart, you create duplicate side effects. You need smart step-level recovery rules. Save your progress at each successful step. That way, if step 3 fails, the system knows whether it can safely retry step 3, refresh the challenge, resume from saved progress, or if it truly needs to start a brand new session.
All right, tying all these mechanics together, here is your absolute do not do list. Common mistakes you must avoid. Don't solve all steps at once. Don't solve out of order. Do not drop those cookies between steps. Stop hard-coding site keys when the live page can change. Stop restarting the full chain when only one step needs recovery. And above all, never ever report a successful run just because your CAPTCHA API happened to return a token.
Which leads us perfectly to Area 6, the ultimate success metric measuring the actual outcome. Step 7 of our framework forces us to completely redefine how we measure success in our automation scripts. Here's the big takeaway. Stop obsessing over your token count, stop obsessing over your solve count. A completed chain is not just a list of tokens, it is the final outcome. Did the account step actually complete? Did the checkout review page finally load? Was the record updated? Did the QA flow reach the expected state? If you're asking what is the most important metric, it's this. Your primary metric, like 90% of what you should care about, must be the chain completion rate. The full workflow must reach the final accepted state. You want to track step completion rate, token age at use, session continuity, partial state incidents, and your actual cost per completed chain. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. If a valid CAPTCHA token doesn't actually guarantee form success, what blind spots are hiding in your workflows right now? Remember, CAPTCHA chains are not just multiple CAPTCHA solves. They are complex, multi-step workflows with state, timing, dependencies, and recovery risks. And please keep in mind, these types of automation techniques should only ever be used in owned, client-authorized, or contractually permitted environments. But with that said, it's officially time to stop counting tokens and start tracking true workflow completion. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and happy mapping.